Marcus destroyed my academic future and stole my relationship. Now he's living in his car while I'm heading to Harvard Medical School with a full scholarship. I thought I had everything figured out my junior year. Perfect GPA, stellar MCT scores, and what seemed like the most supportive roommate in the world. Marcus had moved in that fall, and at first, I genuinely believed I'd hit the roommate jackpot. He'd bring me coffee during late-night study sessions, offered to quiz me on anatomy, and even helped me organize my color-coded study schedule that covered every inch of our shared living room wall. The first red flag should have been how interested he was in my academic life. Most college guys couldn't care less about their roommates' organic chemistry homework, but Marcus always wanted to know about my upcoming exams, my lab schedules, and especially my scholarship applications. I was flattered by his attention and mistook his questions for genuine friendship. My boyfriend at the time was the sweet guy from my biochemistry class. We'd been together for almost 2 years, and I was already imagining him visiting me during medical school rotations. He knew how important my studies were and had always been incredibly supportive of my dreams. We'd spend hours in the library together, him working on his engineering assignments while I memorized metabolic pathways. The sabotage started so subtly that I initially blamed myself. My carefully organized textbooks would mysteriously disappear from my desk only to reappear days later in random places around the apartment. I'd find my organic chemistry book wedged behind the couch cushions or discover my anatomy atlas stuffed in the back of the hall closet. Marcus would always act shocked and suggest maybe I'd been studying so hard that I was getting absent-minded. Then came the exam schedule mishaps. I'd double-check my calendar and study plan the night before only to rush to class and find out the exam had been moved to a different day or time. My professors started giving me strange looks when I'd show up on the wrong day, frantic and unprepared. I began questioning my own memory and organizational skills, wondering if the stress of pre-med was finally getting to me. The lab incidents were the worst. I'd spend hours preparing solutions and setting up experiments, only to come back the next day to find my samples contaminated or my data sheets missing crucial measurements. My lab partner started making comments about my reliability, and I could see the doubt creeping into my professor's eyes. My grades began slipping for the first time in my academic career. Meanwhile, Marcus seemed to be thriving. His own pre-med coursework appeared effortless, and he'd often mention how well his exams went while I was struggling with material I'd previously mastered. He'd offer to help me study, but somehow his explanations always left me more confused than before. He'd give me incorrect formulas or outdated information, then act concerned when I'd perform poorly on assignments. The relationship destruction happened gradually too. Marcus would make innocent comments about how stressed I seemed, how I was probably too overwhelmed to be a good partner. He'd suggest that maybe I should focus on my studies instead of splitting my attention between academics and romance. When my boyfriend would come over, Marcus would find ways to interrupt our time together, always with seemingly legitimate reasons. I started noticing my boyfriend pulling away. Our study dates became shorter, and he seemed distracted when we were together. He'd make comments about how I seemed different lately, less focused, more scattered. I thought it was just the stress of junior year affecting our relationship, but I was determined to work through it. The breaking point came during finals week of spring semester. I'd been studying for my most important exam, one that would determine my eligibility for a prestigious summer research program. I'd prepared for weeks, creating detailed study guides and reviewing every possible topic. The night before the exam, I went to bed confident and ready. I woke up the morning of the exam to find my study materials soaked with coffee. Marcus claimed he'd accidentally knocked over a mug while getting ready for his own exam, but something about his explanation felt rehearsed. I had no choice but to take the exam without my primary study resources, and I bombed it spectacularly. That same week, I walked into my favorite coffee shop to find my boyfriend sitting across from Marcus, their heads close together in what looked like an intimate conversation. My stomach dropped as I watched them, and I realized I'd been seeing them together more frequently over the past few months. Little meetings that Marcus had never mentioned, despite living with me and knowing every detail of my schedule. The confrontation that followed was devastating. My boyfriend accused me of being distant and unreliable, claiming that Marcus had been telling him about my erratic behavior and how I'd been complaining about our relationship. He said Marcus had been a good friend to him during a difficult time, providing support that I apparently couldn't offer anymore. The breakup happened right there in the coffee shop, with Marcus sitting silently but somehow managing to look both sympathetic and victorious. I lost my scholarship that semester. My GPA had dropped too significantly and my professors had noted concerns about my reliability and consistency. The summer research program rejected my application and my medical school prospects looked grim. I felt like my entire future had crumbled in a matter of months. Marcus got accepted to medical school that spring. He made sure I knew about his acceptance, showing me the congratulatory emails and discussing his plans for the following year. He even offered to give me advice about reapplying, suggesting that maybe I wasn't cut out for the competitive nature of medical school and should consider other career paths. I moved out of our shared apartment that summer, devastated and questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. I spent months wondering if I'd really been as scattered and unreliable as everyone seemed to think. The self-doubt was crushing, and I seriously considered giving up on my medical school dreams entirely. But something about the whole situation never sat right with me. I kept thinking about the timing of everything, how Marcus always seemed to know exactly what was happening in my academic life, and how convenient it was that he'd grown so close to my boyfriend during my period of academic struggle. Update 1. I took a gap year to figure things out, which turned out to be the best decision I could have made. I moved back home and got a job at a local research lab, determined to rebuild my confidence and prove to myself that I could still succeed in science. The work was challenging and rewarding, and I slowly started to feel like myself again. During the year, I decided to investigate what had really happened during my junior year. I reached out to my former professors and discovered some disturbing information. My organic chemistry professor mentioned that someone had called his office multiple times asking about exam schedules, claiming to be helping me stay organized. My lab supervisor revealed that my experimental samples had been accessed after hours, something that required keycard entry and would have left a digital trail. The most shocking discovery came when I contacted my former boyfriend. We met for coffee and I could tell he felt guilty about how things had ended. He eventually admitted that Marcus had been feeding him information about my supposed complaints and concerns about our relationship. Marcus had painted himself as the concerned friend who was just trying to help mediate our problems, but looking back, my ex realized that Marcus had been the one creating many of the issues he was supposedly trying to solve. My ex told me that Marcus had been incredibly persistent in their friendship, always wanting to hang out and always steering conversations toward our relationship. He'd convinced my boyfriend that I was overwhelmed and needed space, that I'd been saying things I'd never actually said. Marcus had been so convincing that my boyfriend genuinely believed he was doing the right thing by ending our relationship. Armed with this information, I decided to file a formal complaint with the university. The investigation revealed that Marcus had indeed been accessing my lab materials after hours and had been making unauthorized calls to various professors' offices. The digital evidence was overwhelming, and the university took the matter seriously. But Marcus had already graduated and started medical school, so the immediate consequences were limited. I felt frustrated that he'd gotten away with his sabotage, but I was determined to move forward with my own life. I threw myself into my gap year job and began preparing to reapply to medical school. The research lab where I worked became my sanctuary. I was contributing to important studies and rediscovering my passion for science. My supervisor was impressed with my work and offered to write a recommendation letter for my medical school applications. I felt like I was finally getting back on track. During my reapplication process, I wrote extensively about my gap year experience and what I'd learned about resilience and perseverance. I was honest about my academic struggles but focused on how I'd grown from the experience. I submitted applications to several top programs, including Harvard, which had always been my dream school. The waiting period was agonizing, but I tried to stay positive and continue excelling in my research work. I'd learned not to take anything for granted and to trust my instincts when something felt wrong. The experience with Marcus had taught me valuable lessons about recognizing manipulation and protecting myself from people who didn't have my best interests at heart. Update 2. The acceptance letter from Harvard Medical School arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was at the lab when I got the email, and I had to read it 3 times before I believed it was real. Not only had I been accepted, but I'd also been awarded a full scholarship that would cover tuition, room, and board for all 4 years. I cried right there in the lab, surrounded by petri dishes and research equipment, feeling like I'd finally reclaimed my future. The same week I got my acceptance, I received a phone call that changed everything. It was from a former classmate who'd ended up at the same medical school as Marcus. She had some shocking news. Marcus had been caught cheating during his first-year exams. Apparently, he'd been part of a group that had been stealing exam materials and sharing answers. The academic dishonesty investigation had uncovered a pattern of cheating that went back to his undergraduate years. The medical school had expelled him immediately, and the incident had been reported to all other medical programs. Marcus was effectively blacklisted from pursuing medicine anywhere in the country. His dreams of becoming a physician were over, and he'd lost everything he'd gained through his deception. But the story didn't end there. My classmate told me that during the investigation, Marcus had tried to deflect blame by claiming he'd learned his cheating techniques from a former roommate. He'd actually named me specifically, saying I'd been the one who taught him how to sabotage other students and steal exam materials. The investigators had looked into his claims and discovered the truth about what he'd done to me during college. The medical school had contacted my undergraduate university, and the investigation had been reopened. Marcus was facing serious academic misconduct charges that could affect his ability to pursue any graduate program. The web of lies he'd built was finally unraveling, and he was facing the consequences of years of deception. I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness when I heard the news. Part of me was relieved that the truth had finally come out, but I also felt sorry for Marcus in a way. He destroyed his own future through his dishonest actions, and now he was paying the price. A few weeks later, I got a text message from an unknown number. It was Marcus asking if we could meet to talk. He said he had something important to tell me and that he was sorry for everything that had happened. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a neutral location. Marcus looked terrible when I saw him. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He seemed genuinely remorseful as he apologized for what he'd done to me during college. He admitted to sabotaging my studies, interfering with my relationship, and trying to destroy my academic future. He claimed he'd been consumed by jealousy and competition, but he insisted there was more to the story that I needed to know. That's when he dropped the bombshell that changed everything I thought I knew about my life. Marcus told me that he was my half-brother, the result of an affair our father had years before my parents got married. He'd grown up knowing about me but had never been acknowledged by our father, who had chosen to maintain his marriage and pretend Marcus didn't exist. Marcus explained that he'd sought me out in college not as a random roommate but as his half-sister. He'd been watching me from afar for years, seeing how I had everything he'd always wanted: our father's love, financial support, and the opportunity to pursue my dreams without struggle. His sabotage hadn't been random competition between pre-med students, it had been a calculated attempt to eliminate me as competition for our father's attention and inheritance. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I thought about all the times Marcus had asked detailed questions about my family, my childhood, and my relationship with our father. I remembered how he'd seemed to know things about me that I'd never told him, and how he'd always been particularly interested in my father's work and accomplishments. Marcus told me that he'd originally planned to reveal our relationship after he'd successfully destroyed my academic career and established himself as the successful child our father could be proud of. He'd wanted to present himself as the worthy heir while I was struggling and directionless. But his own dishonesty had backfired spectacularly, and now he was the one who'd lost everything. He was living in his car, unable to afford rent after being expelled from medical school and losing his student loans. He'd been cut off from the family that had raised him after they discovered his academic fraud. He was desperate and alone, and he was asking me to help him get back on his feet. I sat in stunned silence as Marcus finished his story. The betrayal felt even deeper now that I knew he was family, that he'd systematically tried to destroy my life not as a rival but as a brother who'd been consumed by jealousy and resentment. I felt sick thinking about how he'd manipulated my relationship and sabotaged my education while knowing we shared the same father. Final update. I left that meeting with Marcus without giving him an answer about helping him. I needed time to process everything he'd told me and figure out how to move forward. The revelation about our relationship had turned my entire understanding of the situation upside down, and I was struggling to make sense of it all. I decided to confront our father directly. It was one of the hardest conversations I'd ever had, but I needed to know the truth. My father broke down when I told him about Marcus and what had happened. He admitted to the affair and confirmed that Marcus was indeed my half-brother. He'd been paying child support secretly for years but had never acknowledged Marcus publicly because of the shame and the potential impact on our family. My father was devastated to learn about Marcus's actions and the way he tried to destroy my future. He'd had no idea that Marcus even knew about our family, let alone that he'd been planning such an elaborate scheme. The guilt and regret in my father's eyes were heartbreaking, and I realized that his choices had created a situation that hurt everyone involved. Over the following weeks, I struggled with the decision about whether to help Marcus. Part of me felt obligated because he was family, but another part of me was still angry about what he'd done to me. I'd lost years of my life to his sabotage, and I'd nearly given up on my dreams entirely because of his actions. I ultimately decided to offer Marcus limited help, but with strict conditions. I told him I wouldn't let him stay with me, but I would help him find temporary housing and connect him with resources to get back on his feet. I made it clear that any relationship we might have in the future would depend on his willingness to make genuine amends for his actions. Marcus seemed grateful for even this small gesture, and he agreed to my conditions. I helped him find a room in a transitional housing program and connected him with job placement services. I also insisted that he get counseling to address the issues that had led him to such destructive behavior. The process of helping Marcus was emotionally exhausting, but it also gave me a sense of closure. I realized that I'd grown stronger through everything I'd experienced, and I was able to set boundaries that protected my own well-being while still extending compassion to someone who had hurt me deeply. As I prepared to start medical school at Harvard, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The sabotage and betrayal had been devastating, but they'd also taught me valuable lessons about resilience, self-advocacy, and the importance of trusting my instincts. I'd learned that sometimes the people who seem most supportive can be the ones who are working against you, and that success often comes from persevering through unexpected challenges. My first day at Harvard Medical School was everything I dreamed it would be. I walked into the lecture hall with confidence, knowing that I'd earned my place through hard work and determination. The full scholarship felt like validation of everything I'd been through, and I was excited to finally pursue my passion for medicine without the shadow of sabotage hanging over me. Marcus and I maintain limited contact now. He's working in retail while trying to figure out his next steps, and he's been consistent with his counseling appointments. Our relationship is complicated and probably always will be, but I've found peace in knowing that I handled the situation with integrity and compassion despite what he'd done to me. The experience taught me that family relationships can be complex and that blood doesn't automatically create loyalty or love. It also showed me that sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living well and achieving your dreams despite the obstacles others put in your way. Looking back, I'm almost grateful for what happened, as strange as that sounds. The adversity made me stronger and more determined, and it helped me develop the resilience I'll need as a physician. I learned that setbacks don't define you, but how you respond to them does. As I begin my medical school journey, I carry with me the lessons learned from those difficult years. I know that I can overcome challenges, that I can trust my instincts when something feels wrong, and that I have the strength to pursue my dreams no matter what obstacles arise. The boy who tried to destroy my future is now asking for help while I'm starting the next chapter of my life with a full scholarship to one of the best medical schools in the country. Sometimes karma works in mysterious ways, and sometimes the best revenge really is living well. I still think about my ex-boyfriend sometimes and wonder what might have been if Marcus hadn't interfered with our relationship. But I've realized that anyone who could be so easily manipulated probably wasn't the right person for me anyway. I'm focused on my future now, and I'm excited to see where this journey takes me. The road to medical school was longer and more difficult than I'd originally planned, but I'm finally where I'm supposed to be. I'm ready to dedicate my life to helping others, and I know that the challenges I've faced have prepared me to be a better physician and a stronger person. Marcus destroyed my academic future and stole my relationship, but in the end, he couldn't destroy my dreams. Now he's the one who's lost everything while I'm just getting started.